Salve! And we are back again after a short time.
Next one, number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah, this time we're down in the morn. Let's get ready to read The Rattle of the Bones. The Rattle of the Bones. There are 3 armies in the Mornwald, marched up from Segura past Fort Braden to deal with the Fenny problem. While the quiet steppe and the strong reeds concern themselves with ushering the Fenny of the woods that fell south and west out of the morn into the shadowed forest of Leathhaven, the drakes have an altogether more difficult task ahead of them. The steppe and the reeds have an uneventful 3 months. Whatever fight the Fenny exiles once had was consumed by the seemingly bottomless sinkhole that swallowed their homes. Under the watchful eyes of the 2 imperial armies, they move quickly with little fuss, down from the chalk downs, through Southmoor, and out of the marches into the wilderness of Leaven's Glen. Meanwhile, the drakes raise a camp on the western edge of the chalk downs, barely a stone's throw from the eaves of the forest of Alderley. A few hundred additional yeomen under the command of independent marcher captains join them there. Once they have had a few days to catch their breath, they advance into the dark wood. There are marchers in Alderley, of course, dour folk with a poor reputation. Charcoal burners, woodcutters, hunters and the like. There have been rumours for centuries that many of these yo-folk have Fenny blood running in their veins. The drakes find little welcome among them. Sullen faces turn to watch them pass deeper into the woods. The further from the edge of the forest they travel, the fewer faces there are. The soldiers begin to encounter empty cottages, even small hamlets that have been abandoned, and all the signs say that abandonment has taken place already. All the indications are that some of the marcher folk have chosen to side with the Fenny against the invaders from the north. The passage through the woods is complicated by the need to adhere to the peculiar instructions captured from the Fenny of the woods that fell. Walk a certain distance in this direction, turn aside, pass beneath the shadow of a certain tree, speak a certain rhyme. There is a path, but it is clearly designed for a small band of people to walk, and not the 4,000 soldiers more used to fighting out in the open. The deeper they press towards the heart of the wood, the wilder it becomes. The trees rise higher and higher, ancient oaks that have stood since before the ancestors of these marchers left Dawn. There is an oppressive atmosphere, as if the trees themselves do not want the soldiers here. The shadows beneath their boughs seem particularly dense, heavy almost. The sensation of being watched intensifies. Yet nothing concrete is seen at all. The suggestion of movement, the sound of twigs breaking, a disturbance in a bush. That's all. No attack, no sign of anything larger than a robin. For the most part, there is simply an unnatural silence that grows more pronounced as the distant sun rises through the sky and begins to set. It would be easy to become separated. Here in the depths of Alderley Wood, it is perhaps fortunate that the army is bound together, to a degree, by autumn magic. The Brotherhood of Tian is intended to improve logistics, to help quartermasters and victuallers. Yet it also helps to keep the army together, focused on its goals, more able to quickly communicate information between officer and soldier. Every little helps. After a long day marching through the woods, the yeomen start to become restless. A murmur runs through the ranks. Are there really Fenny here? Surely they should have encountered some by now. How large are these woods anyway? Could this all be a wild goose chase? Then, with the shadows deepening among the trunks of the ancient trees, everything changes. Between one breath and the next, it becomes light. The trees still ancient oaks, but they are massive, reaching up to scrape the suddenly overcast pale sky. There is no sign of the sun through the slate-grey clouds. The leading soldiers falter, come to a stop, mouths gaping. Looking back, their comrades are barely visible through a thick fog that coils unpleasantly between the trees, but the farther ranks march on seemingly unaware of the mist. Some of the landskeepers are able to provide an explanation after a few moments. The Drakes are, unbelievably, no longer in the Empire. No longer in the mortal realm, in fact. They have passed across the boundary of a powerful regio, or rather, they have passed through the boundary of a regio, into the chamber that lies beyond. They are now somewhere part way between the world of mortals and one of the eternal realms. The Winter Realm, if the signs are being read correctly. More and more soldiers press through, slowing to a halt and looking around in confusion. This is unexpected. The assumption seems to have been that the Feni were simply good at camouflaging their camp in the heart of Alderley, or at an absolute outside were using night magic to confuse the approach. It is quickly becoming clear that this is not the case, that the Feni stronghold must actually be built here in the environs of a supernatural place outside the normal world. The directions captured by the Marcher heroes are clearly a secret way of travelling through the woods that allow a group of mundane folk to attune themselves to the boundaries without needing to rely on magical means to enter and hopefully leave the Regio. There is some quick talk of turning back, but the captains will have none of it. They are here to do a job, and while the Feni might live in a magical place, they are still mortal people. The soldiers rally, regroup, and resume their march. Now there is a sign of habitation. Eerie culling designs carved into the boles of massive trees, unsettling arrangements of sticks, feathers, bones, and rope hang from their branches, turning this way and that in the breeze. Circles of black stone and white granite dolmen in clearings, surrounding patches of ground covered with healthy bladeroot and true vervain plants, and increasingly peculiar spindly effigies with bodies of tattered leather, cloth, and bracken, and fleshless skeletal heads of large birds, bears, oxen, and even horses. These last, these unnatural scarecrows, are especially unsettling. Where they can, the soldiers pull them down and trample them underfoot. Then the first Feni are encountered, moving quickly between the trees. They are stealthy ambushers blending into the undergrowth as they launch volleys of arrows and barbed javelins against the flanks of the Marcher army. Quick skirmishers emerge from hiding, striking quickly then retreating back into the shadows beneath the trees, leaving an unlucky few down and bleeding. The forest itself seems to conspire to aid the Feni defenders. Any yeomen who stray far from the main column, who lose track of their comrades, are quickly lost among the trees. Few make it back. Those who do will not speak of what they have encountered in the dark. Here and there, fresh bloodstains begin to appear on the boles of the great oaks. Many are handprints, human hands covered in flesh blood pressed against the bark. But here and there are splashes and pools that suggest more murderous activity. There are a few Draugr soldiers among the Drakes, pale-skinned and bloody-eyed. The longer they spend in the sorcerous woods, the weaker their grasp on their humanity becomes, the stronger the call of their blood. It is as if the Regio itself is intentionally attacking them, strengthening their connection to the Winter Realm. Perhaps it is unintentional. The stronger their blood, the more protective of their fellow soldiers they become, the more focused on the idea of destroying the prey they have come here to hunt. After another few hours or so of marching and skirmishing, the trees begin to thin a little. The sky, which has remained a uniform pale grey throughout, suddenly darkens as if the unseen sun has precipitously fallen below the horizon. Lanterns and torches are lit, and the drakes emerge into a large clearing containing dozens of simple wooden huts. A village surrounding an oak tree of truly immense size, thousands of stick and bone and feather effigies hung from the tree, twisting and turning this way and that in the wind, and the bark of the tree that has been scoured over centuries with swirling white lines that curve and weave from the thick roots up to the highest branches, given the tree an unreal, unnatural appearance. The Feni, it seems, trusted that their location from inside a winter regio would protect them from outsiders, have prepared few defences. Certainly nothing that will present much of an obstacle for 5,000 imperial soldiers. The village is surrounded by a simple palisade and a ditch lined with wooden spikes. As the drakes line up, an ultimatum is given to the Feni barely visible in the trees and among the huts. Surrender or face the wrath of the marchers. Any who lay down their weapons voluntarily will not be harmed. Any who resist will be shown no mercy. In answer, a single voice cries back, "We will never be slaves again." And then nothing further. None move to lay down their weapons. They seem committed to the futile defence of their settlement. The yeomanry spread out and begin a well-disciplined assault against the Feni settlement. The fighting is savage, but the outcome is never in doubt. The Feni are outnumbered and outclassed on every level. Few of them even have metal weapons. Their spears and arrows are mostly of sharpened flint, their shields of leather stretched across wicker frames. A few have steel blades, which when examined after the battle prove to have been forged by Jotun smiths or in marcher armories, most likely stolen from corpses. Or perhaps they acquired the blades from different places. For, tragically, among the defenders of the Feni village, there are also marcher folk. Inhabitants of Alderley who have chosen for whatever reason to throw their lot in with the Feni, even though it is hopeless. Even though there is no chance for this battle to end any other way than how it inevitably does. Charcoal cutters, bounders, hunters, and tree cutters from the marcher villages on the outskirts of Alderley fighting with marcher weapons and marcher bull-headed obstinacy against their own people. They bleed and die just as easily as the Feni do. The Feni have other allies as well, more unnatural ones. As the battle is joined, a line of horrific beasts comes marching through the trees all around the village. They look much like the strange scarecrows, but much larger. Some are as tall as 20 feet or more, striding on spindly wooden legs. Constructs of bone, leather, fur, and feather, with the skeletal heads of immense birds, surmounted with antlers. They possess terrible long wooden arms, equipped with scything talons that rip through armour and inflict terrible bleeding wounds that will not stop bleeding. Unfortunately for the Feni, these creatures are quickly discovered to be dry as kindling, the slightest flame setting them alight. Of course, then they become massive burning constructs, and for a short time become even more dangerous. Quickly the soldiers discover that hurling torches, then keeping the things at bay with a line of polearms, neutralises the threat. As the battle continues to its inevitable end, birds begin to alight in the branches of the oak tree at the heart of the village. First a few, then over the course of the battle, several hundred, cloaking the tree in leaves of black feathers. They do not attack, merely watch silently as the Feni are surrounded and killed. It seems that for each village defender killed, for each life ended, another bird alights on the tree. Then, without warning, as if their numbers have passed a certain threshold, they launch themselves up into the air, crying and cawing, an indescribable cacophony in which many of the marchers fancy they hear mocking words. A pall falls across the soldiers, a terrible chill that sets their hair on end, and for a long moment quells the fighting. Then, as the last of the birds disappears into the dark sky, the autumn leaves begin to fall from the trees. A few at first, and then in an avalanche, it begins to snow. The surviving Fenny rally at the far end of the village. There cannot be more than 50 of them left. The drakes regroup again, rallying for the final push. One last chance is given to surrender, but again the Fenny ignore it. The snow begins to fall more thickly from the black, starless sky. Just above the tops of the trees, behind the Fenny group, a peculiar aurora begins to dance, like the northern lights that are sometimes seen in Sermasuak, in Skarsind, in Volodmots, in Karsk. Then, something terrible appears. With an awful tearing noise, it is as if a door opens behind the last of the Fenny defenders, a great portal 30 feet high through which dancing red firelight pours, washing over the Fenny like blood. Outlined in the doorway is an immense furred beast, with like a terrible hybrid of man and bear, but with the head of a wolf, surmounted with the antlers of a stag. It throws back its head and howls, once unspeakably loud, a sound to freeze the heart, to weigh down the warrior's limbs with fear and exhaustion. In a rumbling, guttural voice, it calls out to the Fenny.
Come! It bellows. Come to me, and I will give you vengeance.
The last Fenny warriors, forced to choose between this beast and the army arrayed against them, run to the door. A hail of arrows fall upon them, upon the beast that shields itself with one great furred arm, and then the door slams shut with a noise like thunder. The fight is over, the drakes have won, the Fenny settlement has been destroyed. The Fenny put to the sword. Victory. The village is quickly looted, then put to the torch along with the tree at the centre of the village. The drakes retreat back towards the boundary of the Regio that leads back to the natural world. Behind them, through the thickening curtain of snow, the fire spreads quickly. There is some momentary concern that the army may not be able to leave the place as easily as they entered, but such fear prove unfounded. The drakes and their supporters stumble, exhausted, out into the autumn woods. The sky is lightening in the east. In some fashion they have spent an entire night in the winter Regio. Over the next few days it becomes clear that not all the Fenny were present for the attack on their village. Around the same time the drakes entered Alderley, a band of perhaps 100 non-combatants fled from the eastern borders of the forest, accompanied by a handful of warriors and elderly marchers, and led by a tall figure variously described as having a feathered cloak and the mask of a raven, or the head of a great black bird, depending. The ragged group made their way across the Green March, and, according to the few who saw them, disappeared into the green depths of Liavan's Glen. Whatever else happened, the Fenny settlement in Alderley has been destroyed for good, with no survivors.
Well, that's not gonna come on.
That got very intense, didn't it?
Yeah, that was a good scrap.
That was a good scrap. All right, well, that's another one down, and I think we've still got more to go, don't we?
We've got a lot more to go.
Got a lot more to go. Right, so
thank you very much for listening.
yeah,
We'll
and
see you in the next one.
you literally still in my line.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.